Hi, I'm Kelly Kramer.
And I'm Scott Sipker. Welcome to a summertime episode.
And Easter Lake in Des Moines on Iowa Outdoors. Coming up on this episode of Iowa Outdoors, we follow a nature photographer whose passion led to a refresh of a popular Iowa wildflower guide.
We'll get up close and personal with nature's wonders, unveiling the tiniest of details.
We'll learn about a high-tech form of photography that allows for impossibly brilliant images.
Finally, we'll join up with a crew of astronomers who regularly meet to capture the mysteries of the night's sky.
We'll have all that and more.
So sit tight. Iowa Outdoors is about to begin.
Funding for Iowa Outdoors is provided by the Claude P. Small, Catherine Small Cousins, and William Carl Cousins Fund at the Lincoln Way Community Foundation in Clinton County to support nature programming on Iowa Public Television.
Many of Iowa's natural wonders you'll find on IPTV can be found in Iowa Outdoors magazine, the Iowa DNR's premier resource for conservation, education, and recreation activities. Subscription information can be found online at iowadnr.gov.
Tiny openings around your house can let in a lot of cold air. This includes areas where you see light coming in, especially around windows, doors, and outlets. With the heating season approaching, Alliant Energy encourages you to weatherize now to make your home more energy efficient.
Welcome to a special photography-themed edition of Iowa Outdoors.
Across our first 5 seasons, we've captured Iowa's natural beauty with the help of some talented photographers.
Men and women whose artistic ability and cameras have taken us on a photographic journey around our state. The return of spring means a comeback of sorts for a key ecological habitat in Iowa, the tallgrass prairie. With its eclectic mix of shapes, the flowers of our prairies provide a much-needed splash of color.
One botanist uses his research with photography to give new life to an iconic book and bring the outdoor world of wildflowers directly to Iowans. For prairies and woodlands of Iowa, spring is a time of rebirth. For Tom Rosburg, it's a time of rediscovery.
Plant people like myself are botanists, in a sense. We like to see as many plants as we can, and I don't know if people keep life lists, so to speak, but like birders, finding new birds, finding new plants is kind of the same thing. There's a lot of adventure and a lot of excitement. I'm always looking for new plant species to photograph. When you spend your life in Iowa photographing plants, it's always nice to find some new species that you haven't had a chance to photograph before. So rather than necessarily shoot individual portraits of individual plant species, another way of thinking about plant photography, one that I like to do as much as I can, is to look for areas where I can do sort of group pictures.
Still capturing nearly all of his work on film, Tom's process is methodical.
Check depth of field, set exposure. F22. Film has very small amount of leeway with exposure.
But his work goes far beyond pleasant images, including more than 3 decades as a wildlife biologist for the Bureau of Land Management in Wyoming, the Fish and Wildlife Service in Colorado, and later, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. His experience tracks diverse ecological environments with a modern-day focus on the prairie and woodland landscapes found right here in Iowa.
Image size is fairly large and pretty much encompasses just the top part of the plant here, getting these flowers and this leaf here.
All right. An early love of photography melded perfectly with the day job of a wildlife biologist and his free time, both spent outdoors.
This one I might use a horizontal format rather than vertical to try to bring in this line of bluebells like this.
Tom's botanical insight and calm demeanor embody his favorite peaceful days on the prairie. That plant-based acumen paired with a lifetime of photographing stationary subjects prepared him for a perfectly appropriate project: Iowa's quintessential wildflower field guides.
Another plant photographed.
Originally published in the late 70s and 80s, these cherished field companions were a mainstay for hikers and explorers of the Midwestern woodland and prairie landscapes. Penned in part by legendary naturalist Sylvan Runkle, the guides were an ecological touchstone for Tom. And when the book publisher came calling for a fresh update, he jumped at the opportunity.
I think, one thing that maybe University of Iowa Press was thinking about when they redid that or revised it was, of course, all new images of plants, but also maybe to have more consistency, sort of a style. Yeah, so this is really a nice representation of the herbaceous layer in an oak forest, first part of May.
His keen eye was an essential match for a guidebook destined to be the authority on plant species, growing environments, textures, size, and shape.
And trying to represent a portrait of the plant in the best way possible to illustrate the plant's beauty, its form, its structure, its identity. This is a guidebook, so you want to be able to ensure that the plant is correctly identified, of course.
Across multiple republished guidebooks, Tom's fresh work joined that of Iowa photographers Larry Stone and Carl Kurtz, as well as Bob and Linda Scarth. But joining the legacy of Sylvan Runkle's original guidebooks and visually adapting them for a new generation was a personal and professional triumph.
All the information that Sylvan put into, all the work he put into those books with respect to ethnobotany, that was sort of his forte. Educating people about how native plants were used. It's really nice, yeah, to be able to help get those books back out there in print.
Nowadays, Tom has not slowed down. He balances his role as professor of ecology and botany at Drake University with numerous field research projects in prairies, woodlands, and wetlands. He's already tackling guidebooks for Luss Hill flora and sand prairies of the Mississippi River Valley, among others. All places you may find Tom Rosburg rediscovering nature's beauty with methodical patience and a sense of peace found in Iowa's outdoors. Outdoor environments often provide wide vistas best suited to panoramic images. But one Iowa photographer wishes to capture the littlest details like moss or budding plants. These details capture the attention of Cindy Skeie, for whom the big picture starts very small. There's a chance that when you've been out enjoying one of the state's many natural wonders, you've passed by Cindy Skeie as she was taking pictures and never even saw her. That's because when Cindy is photographing Iowa's wild side, she quite literally has to get down and dirty in order to capture the magnificence of what can best be described as a small world.
I'm telling you, it's a whole other world in there. I enjoy being outside. I grew up with 4 older brothers. Our house had woods and creek in the back, and we pretty much lived down there our whole childhood, and you knew every inch of those woods, so. I always say if I don't have some dirt under my fingernails, then I'm not doing something right, so.
In a world that seems to embrace the concept that bigger is better, Cindy uses macro photography to make a miniature universe larger than life. Her images put you face to face with the things in nature that are usually stepped over, giving her pictures that, oh wow, appeal.
One of the best compliments I get is when somebody tells me, wow, you know, I never looked at it that way before. Who knew fungus could be fun? To me, fungus, whatever, growing on a dead tree, there's an entire world in there. it amazes me. And if you're walking by and you saw that snail on the leaf, it'd be a slimy little snail sitting on a leaf. And you get up close and wow, it blows my mind.
When Skeie grabs her camera and heads out on a shoot, she rarely has a specific subject in mind, and she never knows what it is that she will actually find.
I'm working on a shot for my water drops, and then I eyeball all this fungus, so, all right, focus.
Cindy says she has been taking pictures for quite some time and started exploring macro photography with her point-and-shoot camera before she got really serious about 4 years ago. The first subjects she focused her attention on were things she found in her own backyard. Her 2012 calendar, Beauty in the Backyard, is a collection of things she found there.
I started gardening avidly, and I originally started taking photos of all the different colors because I love color. I just kept getting more drawn to closer and closer shots, and I'll look at something in my backyard still and just be amazed at what I see through the camera lens.
One of the things Skeie is always looking for is drops of water or sap. For her, it's not so much the drops themselves that she finds intriguing as what's behind them. She's even managed to capture a self-portrait using a drop of sap.
And so I'm standing out there for all the world to see with a tripod and a camera and me on the other side of this trying to take a shot. And so yeah, sap and water drops.
Skeie enjoys all aspects of photography, from the taking of the picture to preparing it for printing. And while she enjoys seeing how people react to her images, she finds exhibiting her work difficult.
It's kind of like you're exposing yourself, because I don't think I realized it until I started putting myself out there that, you know, you're sharing a part of yourself with everybody else. But the more I share it with people, the more fascinated they are. And I like when I hear people saying, oh, you know, I ought to get a macro lens. That looks like fun.
Cindy always seems surprised when she looks in the viewfinder of her camera to see what she's just shot. And when she's out with her camera, it's as if she's on an adventure where there's plenty of treasure to be found.
There's just so much to see, and people walk by this stuff every day. A lot of people don't realize you just walk out your back door, you know. You don't have to be in a park. You could walk down a greenbelt trail, stop on the side of the trail. You get down there and look, and it's amazing.
Over the past 10 years, photographer Ken West has been selected to visually document many of Iowa's 9 scenic byways. His images display details very difficult to see with the naked eye and impossible to capture with traditional photography. This high-tech approach to natural environments is just one way to entice people to enjoy the Iowa outdoors. The photographs that Ken West takes have a surreal look. There is something about them that is not quite natural, something different that people have trouble identifying.
And I think one of the reasons for that is because I use this technique called high dynamic range photography, where I'll take several photographs of the scene, different exposures, allows me to capture a much wider range of brightness. People are not used to seeing that in a photograph. Where they're used to seeing it is in a painting. And so I think that's one of the reasons when people look at the prints, they think, wow, it looks like a painting.
HDR, or high dynamic range photography, actually reduces the contrast between the darkest and lightest areas of a photograph. The process involves taking several photographs of the same subject at different exposures. A computer is then used to merge those separate photographs into a single HDR image.
This is a photograph that I took in the Les Hills National Scenic Byway, which is located in the western part of Iowa. And to take this scene, I used, this is what it would normally look like here. You can see a normal photograph. I would have lost all the detail in the sun and in the sky, and also quite a lot of detail in the deep shadow areas. but by using a combination of 3 different photographs, one where I photograph using more exposure to capture shadow detail, and then 2 photographs where I use less exposure so I can capture all of the detail around the sun and in the sky, and then I merge those all together, and then the result is this photograph called a high dynamic range photograph. It has a painterly quality because, frankly, only a painter could have captured that traditionally.
Ken West has taught photography at the Maharashi University of Management in Fairfield for 5 years, but he has been involved in photography nearly all his life. His great-grandfather had a photography studio in Missouri, but it was Ken's grandfather, who was a portrait photographer and painter, that taught Ken the basics.
Some of my earliest childhood memories are sitting in the darkroom with my grandfather, watching him develop 4x5, 5x7 sheet film in a tray, and then also watching him make prints when I was very small. So my interest developed very naturally and just progressed from there.
Ken says his interest in landscape and nature photography began less than 10 years ago. He credits the Jefferson County Trail System for focusing his interest on the environment. For Ken, photography is a means of experiencing the world.
A lot of times I may go out to take photographs and I may not see anything that I want to photograph, but there can still be that silence that you experience walking on a trail. And maybe just I didn't see anything that particular time, so I don't come away with any photographs, but then I enjoyed the experience of being out on the trail and feeling the breeze, feeling the wind, hearing the sounds that you hear, the smells, everything.
On the technical side, it might take Ken as long as 20 seconds to take the 3 to 6 exposures he needs to create a high dynamic range photograph. In order to keep the camera as still as possible, he always uses a tripod, uses a shutter release, and locks the mirror up in the camera to minimize vibration. So that his depth of field will remain the same from photograph to photograph, he brackets his exposure using shutter speed rather than changing the lens aperture.
Many years ago, you were always told to have the sun over your shoulder. And I quickly learned, particularly with HDR, to throw that idea out. I like having the sun a lot of times as part of the composition itself. As a matter of fact, sometimes when I'm photographing the scene, I can't really look at the scene. I have to kind of squint and look at it sideways to frame it in my camera because it's too bright, the sun, to actually look right at it.
The photographs Ken West has taken have been featured in a number of galleries across the state. He has also shown his work and conducted a workshop on HDR photography at the National Center for Nature Photography in Ohio. It is the only gallery in the nation devoted exclusively to landscape and nature photography. The goal of the center is to inspire a reverence for natural environments and to promote the preservation of the natural world. It is a goal that is shared by Ken.
We have a role as stewards to nourish and protect the natural world around us. So I think that's a very important thing that people take away from my photographs. And I'd also like to remind people in Iowa, when they look at the photographs, what a wonderful place Iowa is. And I encourage people to go out on the byways, take a Saturday or a Sunday or a weekend and do a byway trip, pick out one. And I think you'll find that you'll experience some really wonderful natural scenes, natural landscapes that are just exquisite. And you just have to take the time to go out and experience it.
Finally, we head to one of the darkest regions of our state at White Rock Conservancy near Coon Rapids. It's where amateur astronomers from across Iowa and neighboring states gather each year for the Iowa Star Party.
It's a weekend of stargazing, astrophotography, and conversation at the legendary Garst Farm. And for one night, it's an opportunity to share an interstellar hobby with curious guests.
It's a hot, late summer afternoon, and amateur astronomers are setting up their telescopes in an empty pasture known as the Star Field at White Rock Conservancy. The skies are clear, and there's a long night of good stargazing ahead.
Tonight we'll be able to probably look at Saturn for a little while before it gets behind the trees, and you just love that moment of, oh, wow, you can see the rings. You hear that over and over. You never get tired of hearing that. First time you see Saturn is a memorable experience with everybody.
For many of the participants, observing the universe is a hobby and a passion. It's a treasure hunt in the sky.
Lots of different things you can do. Some just like to look, some like to take notes, some like to take pictures. It's a wide gamut.
The telescopes range from small to large, simple to complex, homemade and reasonably priced to very expensive. Some are ideal for looking at stars and planets. Others are designed for viewing galaxies and nebula. For beginners, you can even get started with a pair of binoculars.
The light bounces off the big mirror and it comes up to the secondary mirror.
One night each year, the public is invited to the Iowa Star Party. People young and old get a basic lesson in Astronomy 101 and learn how to use a star chart. Then, once it gets dark, they have the chance to walk around the star field, look through the many different telescopes, and explore the wonders of the skies in new ways. The amateur astronomers are on hand to help guide the viewing and answer any questions.
We're actually looking at light that left there about 40 minutes ago. It's over 1 billion miles away right now.
And you know, when it gets darker, there are some beautiful deep sky, some clusters and galaxies. We would love to show you.
White Rock Conservancy is an ideal location because there's very little light pollution from nearby towns or cities. A darker sky means better viewing. Astronomers can see things here that they could never see from their own backyard in a city.
So many people now live in places where you can't even see the sky. And it's not a big tragedy compared to other things that are happening in the world, but it is a loss of beauty, and that's a shame.
Wow. You see it? And that's something. Now look out to the left of the ring, about 4 or 5 diameters from the ring. You'll see a faint speck of light.
Right.
That's its largest moon, Titan,
No way.
which is bigger than our moon, actually.
But it could be up to 1 million stars in that ball. They're all swarming around each other like a hive of bees just spinning around.
You see the different galaxies way off in the distance, and you just can't imagine what, you don't know if there's life out there or what's going on out there, but that's kind of neat to see the distant galaxies.
That little telescope's in there, I gotta be able to look through just to find Polaris.
That's cool.
It's the beauty of the sky. I've always loved it since I was a kid. And I've gone through the visual observing. I've had a number of telescopes. I just love to look at the sky and the things in the sky. And now I've moved on to a new phase of it, imaging. It's expensive, it's frustrating, but when it works, it's so much fun. I love it.
Astrophotography, the art of photographing the skies, is growing in popularity. Amateur astronomers spend hours and hours capturing still images that wow with beauty, grandeur, and artistry.
No, actually I got into astronomy, and astronomy got me into photography. I saw, all the great images and said, wow, I want to do that. So I do more of the wide field stuff, where I'll actually have my camera with a regular lens just piggybacking on the telescope. A lot of the other guys do what's called prime focus, where they'll have the camera hooked onto where the eyepiece normally goes, and you're using the telescope itself as the lens.
There's a lot of different ways to do it, but what I usually do is I use a digital DSLR, Canon 450D. I've advanced a little, that's why there's 2 scopes here. Normally I have my guide scope on this side, and this one tracks the stars. It's got a camera that goes to the computer, and there's software that can lock onto a star and make sure if that star starts to drift in any direction, it'll send commands to the mount and tell the mount to compensate for that and keep the stars centered. Meanwhile, the digital cameras here taking the pictures, usually I take 5 or 10 minute sub-images, and then at the end of a couple hours of that, I'll take all those images, and then in software I can add them together.
With a good eye and the right technique, the stunning work of amateur astrophotographers rivals what some professionals produce. From the sun to other stars and star clusters, planets like Saturn and Jupiter, and even galaxies. The experience is eye-opening and awe-inspiring. A new group of budding amateur astronomers is hooked by the curiosity of what is out there in the universe.
Everybody has a little bit different story to tell about what their interest is, and it's kind of neat seeing that.
I like how it looks so different on Earth, and it looks really different when you're looking through a telescope in space.
Something that I think everybody should experience just once, because it is huge out there, and we have to look beyond just us.
There are several amateur astronomy clubs and associations all across Iowa. Some have their own observatories, and many of them host regular public viewing opportunities. If you're interested in stargazing, it's a good way to get involved and continue learning.
The best thing you can have as a beginning astronomer is a friend.
That wraps up this photography-themed episode of Iowa Outdoors. We encourage you to get outside and explore parks and preserves like Easter Lake here in Des Moines. If you're planning any photography expeditions or outdoor travel, check out our extensive video archive of adventures from across Iowa at iptv.org/Iowa Outdoors.
Our sixth season of Iowa Outdoors will continue with monthly installments throughout the fall with stories from every corner of our state. We'll leave you now with a second look at some of the professionally captured images of Iowa.
Funding for Iowa Outdoors is provided by the Claude P. Small, Catherine Small Cousins, and William Carl Cousins Fund at the Lincoln Way Community Foundation in Clinton County to support nature programming on Iowa Public Television.
Many of Iowa's natural wonders you'll find on IPTV can be found in Iowa Outdoors magazine, the Iowa DNR's premier resource for conservation, education, and recreation activities. Subscription information can be found online at iowadnr.gov.
Tiny openings around your house can let in a lot of cold air. This includes areas where you see light coming in, especially around windows, doors, and outlets. With the heating season approaching, Alliant Energy encourages you to weatherize now to make your home more energy efficient.